When a ruthless duke meets a woman he cannot control, everything he believed about power begins to collapse. A true life story in one part. Part 1. The Road. Nobody in Thorn's Crossing moved for Duke Aldric Vane. That was not unusual. People never moved for Aldric Vane. They moved before him, around him, away from him, the way water moves around a stone it has learned not to argue with. They stepped off paths. They cleared doorways. They pulled children back from the street with a look on their face like they were doing it for the child's sake and not their own, though everyone understood it was for their own. He had ridden into many villages like this one. The reaction was always the same. The carriage wheels on the cobblestone, the stamp of horses, and then the clearing. Like a breath held all at once. Like a crowd that had agreed without speaking to take one step back and stay there, exactly there, until the weight of his presence had passed through and moved on. He had not always found this restful. In his 20s it had irritated him. There was something lonesome about it, though he would not have called it that. In his 30s he had grown accustomed to it, the way you grow accustomed to a room with poor light. You stop expecting the light to change, and you start carrying your own candle. By 41, it had become simply the shape of things, the silence that preceded him, the space that opened, the predictability of it all. The woman in the road did not move. She was standing near the well, not blocking it, not using it, just standing near it in the companionable way that people stand near things they have stood near 1,000 times, with a book open flat in both hands and her eyes down on the page. She was reading, not quickly, not with the air of someone performing absorption, actually reading, in the way that means the rest of the world has been temporarily relocated somewhere you have no intention of visiting. The carriage slowed. His driver called out. She turned a page. Aldric leaned forward. His driver, a man of 23 years in his service who had developed excellent instincts about when to act, and when to wait, and when to simply hold very still and let his employer reach his own conclusions, said nothing. He brought the horses to a near stop and held them there. The woman read another page. Her hand moved to turn it with the automatic ease of someone who has done this thousands of times and has stopped noticing the gesture itself. She was a fast reader and absorbed, and the book she was reading had all of her attention in a way that left nothing over for carriages or horses or the specific weight of a duke's presence. She looked up, not at the carriage, at the sky, the way you do when you have come to the end of a paragraph that requires a moment before the next one can begin. Then she looked at the carriage, then back at the book. She took 2 steps to the left, out of the direct line of the carriage's path, without looking up, without particular hurry, the way you move around a puddle you have noticed in your peripheral vision, and kept reading. Aldric sat back. The carriage moved forward. He looked out the window as they passed her. She did not look up. Her eyes did not flicker toward him. He did not know her name. He did not know what she was reading. He did not, at that particular moment, understand that the next several weeks of his life were going to be organized almost entirely around those 2 facts. His business in Thorn's Crossing was a drainage dispute. This sounds smaller than it was. Drainage disputes in the northern counties at that time were the kind of thing that turned into something else if you let them sit long enough. Into debt, into resentment, into the slow, specific anger of people who have been flooded for 3 winters running and have started to suspect the flooding is not entirely an accident of geography. A shared water channel ran through 3 estates, including his. The channel had not been maintained. The levy for maintenance had been collected every year without fail. The flooding had happened anyway. This was his 3rd visit in 2 years to address something that should have been settled on the first. And the fact that it hadn't was a failure on the part of his local administrator, a man whose continued employment was now a question Aldric was actively reconsidering. He did not like coming to Thorn's Crossing. It was small. It smelled of wood smoke and damp, and a tannery somewhere upwind that worked hard and smelled like it. The inn had low ceilings and a landlord who called him Your Grace with the slightly off inflection of a man who has been practicing the phrase under his breath and is still not entirely confident he is landing it. The mattress was adequate. The food was the food of a place that cooked for people who worked with their hands and needed to be full more than they needed to be interested. He settled in. He reviewed documents. He had the meeting with his administrator, a nervous man in his 50s, with the handshake of someone who has heard the word ruthless applied to the person across from them and has taken it somewhat more seriously than the situation requires. The administrator promised resolution within the week. Aldric gave him 3 days and watched the man's expression do 3 different things in approximately 2 seconds. His steward, Oliver Marsh, who had been with him 9 years and was one of perhaps 4 people on Earth Aldric would describe as genuinely indispensable, collapsed 2 hours after dinner. Not dramatically. He simply went to his room, sat down on the edge of his bed, and did not get up, and when Aldric's valet knocked at 7 the following morning and got no answer and opened the door, Oliver was lying there with a color in his face that was wrong. Not alarming wrong, just wrong. The color of someone whose body has redirected its resources overnight without asking permission. Aldric stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds. He was a man who made decisions fast. This was, if you ask anyone who had worked for him or opposed him, his defining quality. Not intelligence, not the famous coldness, but the speed. The capacity to look at a situation and know what needed to happen next. He had built his career on this. He had survived court intrigue on this. He had sat across from men who wanted to ruin him and walked away intact, on this. 3 seconds. Then he said, "Who is the physician in this village?" His valet said there wasn't one. Exactly. There was a physician's daughter. She ran a room of some kind, not licensed. People went to her. "Get her," said Aldric. Part 2. The room where people come to die. Her name was Marin Ashby. She was 31 years old, the only child of the late Dr. Thomas Ashby, and she had been running what she called the dispensary, and what the village called Marin's place, and what the county administration, if pressed, and in a charitable mood, would have called a legally ambiguous but practically necessary operation for 6 years. She had no license. She had her father's instruments, good ones, carefully maintained, his 23 years of patient notes written in a handwriting that leaned permanently to the right, as though always slightly running late for something, his books annotated in 2 different inks from 2 different periods of his life, and the complete education she had built for herself by reading everything he owned and watching everything he did from the time she was old enough to follow him quietly and not get in the way. She had watched him deliver babies, and set bones, and sit with people who were not going to recover. She had watched him be wrong, and acknowledge it without ceremony. She had watched him be right in ways that should not have been possible with the tools he had. In the last 2 years of his life, when his hands had stopped cooperating with his intentions, she had done most of the work herself while he directed, and then she had done all of it while he rested, and then he had died, and she had continued. She was not licensed. She said this to everyone who came, not as an apology and not as a disclaimer, but as information. This is what I am and what I am not, and you can make your own decision about whether to sit down. Most people sat down. She was at her work table reviewing her father's notes on a difficult birth she had attended the previous week. The baby had come the wrong way round, and she had done something she had only read about, and it had worked, and she was trying to determine whether she had done it correctly or had simply gotten away with something through the mercy of God and favorable circumstances, when the knock came at 7:15 in the morning. She did not like morning visitors. Morning visitors were either very bad or very anxious, and she had limited patience for very anxious. Before she had finished her tea, she opened the door, a young man in good livery, hat in both hands, working conscientiously at being polite. "Miss Ashby, the Duke of Cairvast's steward is ill. The Duke requests your assistance." She looked at him for a moment. "Where?" "The inn. His room is on the—" "I know where the inn is," she said. "I live here." She went back inside, got her bag, came out again, and walked. The young man followed at a slight trot, which was the natural result of her walking pace, and the length of her legs, and the fact that she was not, in any meaningful sense, waiting for him. Oliver Marsh was 44, sweating with the specific quality that means a fever has been building since the night before without anyone quite noticing it arrive, and had the slightly absent expression of a man whose body has directed all available resources away from social interaction for the time being. She examined him efficiently. He answered her questions without embellishment and without minimizing, which she appreciated. Some patients told you what they thought you wanted to hear. He told her what was true. The Duke was standing in the corner of the room. This was the first notable thing about him. Powerful men did not generally stand in corners. They stood in the center of rooms, or they stood in doorways in a way that made the doorways theirs, or they positioned themselves at angles that required you to orient toward them. This man was standing in the far corner near the window, with his arms at his sides and his face arranged in the specific blankness of someone watching something very carefully. She did not look at him. She had learned a long time ago that the fastest way to make powerful men stop feeling like variables she had to account for was to simply not account for them. Ignore them long enough, and they either left or they settled into the room. Very few of them had ever had the experience of being present in a room and not being the subject of it, and most found the novelty either irritating enough to make them leave or interesting enough to make them quiet. He needs rest, fluids, and the fever must break in the next 24 hours, she said to the room in general. It is not serious yet. It can become serious. I will check back at noon. What is it? Said the Duke. His body is fighting something. I don't know what yet. I'll know more at noon. Can you stay? She looked at him then, not evaluating him, not yet, just looking. I have other patients, she said. Name your fee for the day. I don't work by the day. Noon. She picked up her bag and left. In the hallway she heard him say something to his valet. Not the words, just the tone. Not anger, the specific tone of a man who has made a calculation and arrived at a number he was not expecting. She went home, finished her tea, and picked up her father's notes. He had not expected a no. This was notable enough on its own. He had expected negotiation, a higher figure requested, a counteroffer made, the ordinary friction of a transaction. He had not expected a no, so complete it left no room for friction. He turned it over in his mind on the walk back to the inn. Not the refusal itself, but the quality of it, the way she had not softened it, the way she had not made it apologetic or strategic. She had said no, the way you say the sky is gray, because it was true, and that was that. Part 3. The offer. He came to the dispensary at 10 that morning, not for medical reasons. His walk said this before anything else did, the walk of a man who has chosen to be somewhere rather than the walk of a man who has been sent, which is a different thing entirely. She was dressing Patrick Finn's hand. Patrick had gotten it into an argument with a threshing machine 3 days prior. The machine had won decisively, and Patrick had the particular philosophical equanimity of a man who accepts the result while privately disputing the margin. A few minutes, she said to the room. The Duke sat on the bench along the wall, sharing it with Patrick's wife, who was 63 and had long since stopped finding anything surprising, and a young woman with a child on her lap who was working very hard not to stare at the Duke and achieving only partial success. Marin finished the dressing. Patrick left. Patrick's wife left. The young woman lingered, looked at the Duke once more with an expression she could not entirely suppress, and also left. You empty my waiting room, Marin said. I apologize. She looked at him. This was the second unexpected thing he had said to her. The first had been the question, can you stay, rather than an instruction. This was an apology. Unprompted, unqualified, without the softening that would have made it not quite an apology. She filed both of these. What did you want? She said. This building, he said. I need it for the remainder of my stay. Administrative space. A place to work and receive people privately. 2 weeks, perhaps less. I'll pay you for the inconvenience of relocating and for any income you lose during that time. Name a figure. She sat down across from him. No, she said. I haven't mentioned the figure. There is no figure. I am not relocating my practice. My patients come here. Some of them cannot walk far. Some of them can barely walk at all. The building is not separable from what I do. They are the same thing. So no. He looked at her. Double what you're imagining, he said. No, triple. You can keep going, she said. The amount of money you offer changes what's in the room. It doesn't change what I just told you, which is that my patients cannot walk far. You can offer more, and I'll say no with more money on the table. The table will have more money. The answer will be the same. There was a silence. She watched what happened behind his face. It was not anger. She had been braced for something like anger, because men who heard no from people in her position did not always receive it cleanly. It was something older than anger. More interior. The look of a man who has pushed on a door his entire life and has just pushed on one that does not give. "I see," he said. He stood. He was very tall in a small room, and he was not using the height the way some men did, as something to lean on, something to let the room feel. He was just tall, standing, taking up the space he actually occupied. "Oliver," he said, "will he be all right?" "I don't know yet." "Noon." He nodded. He left. She sat for a moment in the quiet of the empty room, looking at the door he had just walked through. Then she opened the next patient's file. There were 4 more people to see before noon. She thought about this for a moment after he left, about the fact that he had come at all. Men of his standing did not generally come to dispensaries in market villages at 10 in the morning to sit on patient benches and have their offers declined. They sent people. They left notes. They applied pressure through channels and waited for results. He had come himself, sat on the bench, and taken no for an answer, with a quality she was still trying to name. Not graceful exactly, and not resigned. Something more like a man who has noted a new piece of information and is not yet sure what to do with it. She added it to the pile of things she was not sure what to do with either. Part 4. Numbers on a page. Oliver Marsh turned the corner on the second day. Past the worst of it, committed to recovering, needing time and rest, and the specific boredom of lying still in a small room watching light move while your blood does the actual work. Marin checked on him twice daily. The Duke was present at most of these visits. She noted this without mentioning it. He noticed her not mentioning it. Something settled between them as a result. A kind of acknowledged tension that neither of them named and that sat in the room during her visits like a piece of furniture they had both decided not to move. On the 3rd afternoon he arrived at the dispensary with a folder of papers. "The village accounts," he said. "The levy records. I need someone who knows how this village has actually experienced things." "Sit down," she said. They sat at her work table, which also served as her desk and her catalog surface, and the place where she ate when she remembered to eat. He spread the documents. She looked at them. Numbers were not difficult for her. She had spent years with the arithmetic of a small practice in a village with limited resources, the careful ledgers of someone making things balance without room for error. She was comfortable with what numbers said, and comfortable with what numbers were being arranged to say, which were not always the same thing. She found the problem in 12 minutes. "Here," she said. She set her finger on the page. "This entry, and this one here, 3 years back, same month, same pattern." He leaned forward to look. The levy was collected. Here. The payment for the channel works is smaller. Here. The difference has gone here. She turned to the next page. "To an account I don't recognize." Silence. "The channel works were completed 2 years ago," she said. "The flooding stopped 2 years ago. The levy is still being collected. For work already done. My administrator," he said. "Not a question. A thing being registered and filed. I don't know whose account that is, but someone has been taking the difference." She watched his face. There was something in it that was not surprise, more like the specific coldness of a man receiving confirmation of something he already suspected, neither satisfied nor shocked, just acknowledging a thing as true. "How did you know to ask me?" she said. "I needed someone who knew the village's perspective. You could have asked anyone here. I could have. I asked you. Why?" A pause. "You didn't move when my carriage came," he said. That seemed like someone who made their own assessments. "I was reading," she said. "I didn't notice your carriage." She stood and went to put the kettle on, her back to him so he couldn't see that she was, for no reason she intended to examine, very nearly smiling. He was quiet for a moment behind her. "You noticed," he said. She poured the water into the kettle. "Eventually," she said, and then decided not to move. "Those are different things." She heard him settle in the chair behind her. She poured the tea. She brought him a cup without asking, because he had been there 2 hours, and had not moved since the folder of accounts, and it seemed like the thing to do. He took it with both hands, which she noticed. Men who were accustomed to things being brought to them took things with one hand. He took it with both. They sat for a while with the accounts spread between them and the tea going warm. Outside, the village was doing what villages did in the middle of the afternoon, the particular industry of a place that starts early and ends late and does not generally pause unless it has a reason. He said, "You did this in 12 minutes. Yes," she said. "I have had men with trained legal minds examine those accounts for 3 months. They were looking for something specific," she said. "I was just looking." He was quiet. "That is the whole difference," she said, "between looking for something and looking. Most people can only do one at a time." He drank his tea. He was, she noticed, a man who sat very still when he was thinking. Not rigid, just still, in the way of someone who has learned to contain things internally rather than fidget them out. She found this, for reasons she was not examining, oddly restful. "I should go," he said, eventually, but he did not move immediately. She picked up the accounts and straightened them, because someone had to, and because her hands needed something to do. Part 5. 3 in the morning. The fever came back. Not Oliver's. Oliver was mending well. The fever belonged to Nora, the blacksmith's daughter, 8 years old, who had been running hot for 2 days, and whose mother had not said anything, because saying something meant someone would tell her how bad it was, and she had found she could tolerate not knowing how bad it was for longer than she had expected. Marin was called at 2:30 in the morning. She went. She was in the middle of her assessment. The girl was hot, her breathing wrong. This needed to move quickly. When the inn door opened and the Duke came in, she turned. "I saw your light," he said. "I heard the blacksmith's wife on the street." "Cold water," she said. "Clean cloths. Move that lamp here." He did not ask questions. He got the water. She heard him ask the blacksmith where the clean water was kept, quietly, without the manner of someone accustomed to having things brought without asking. He found the cloths. He moved the lamp exactly where she had pointed, without moving it slightly too far or not quite far enough, the way people sometimes did when they were paying more attention to being seen helping than to the actual task. She had worked with many people in situations like this. Husbands who wanted to do something but didn't know what, and ended up in the way. Neighbors who helped by asking how they could help, instead of looking at what was needed. She had made her peace with working alone, because working alone was often more efficient than working with someone who required management. He required no management. He understood immediately what it meant to be the secondary person in a room where someone else was doing the main work. The person who stays back when not needed, and is precisely there when needed, and does not, under any circumstances, offer opinions. She had worked alongside trained physicians who could not manage this. He seemed to understand it instinctively, as though some part of him that had spent 40 years being first in every room had been quietly waiting for an occasion to be something else. The girl's fever broke at 4:30, slowly, in the quality of the breathing and the change in the color of her skin and the particular quality of her movement, sleep, finally, rather than the rigid wrong thing she had been doing for the last 2 hours. The mother, who had been sitting against the far wall in the contained stillness of someone terrified to make any sound that might disturb whatever was happening, put her face in her hands. Marin packed her bag. The Duke held the door, not as a performance, just because he was near it, and that was the practical thing. They walked out into the dark street. The village was completely still in the way that villages are at 5 in the morning, as though the world has temporarily forgotten to continue. They walked. She didn't decide to walk. Her feet moved, and he was beside her, and the silence had been going long enough that it had become the other kind, the kind that doesn't need filling. "The child," he said. "Fine," she said. "Sore tomorrow. Herself by Thursday." He nodded. Silence. "You do this alone," he said. "My father did it alone before me." "That's not an answer to what I said." She thought about it. "Yes," she said. "Mostly. Do you ever find it difficult?" "Of course I do. Tonight was difficult." "That was a very sick child. You didn't show it. Showing it doesn't help the child." He was quiet. They reached the edge of the village without meaning to, the place where the lane ended and the fields began, and they stopped there at the line between them, without deciding to stop. The moon was out. He looked different outside than he did in a room, less institutional, more human. She was adding this to the accumulation of things she had noticed about him, which had been growing at a rate she was not going to think about right now. "You should sleep," she said. "Yes," he said. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then she turned and walked back toward her house, and he walked back toward the inn, and the sky was beginning to pale faintly in the east, and neither of them looked back. Part 6. The question he did not have an answer to. The drainage dispute was resolved in 4 days. His administrator, confronted quietly with records he could not explain, across a table from a man who was very still in a way that was worse than shouting, left Thorn's crossing on a Tuesday morning with the expression of someone who has understood how much rope he has been extended and what it means. Aldric did not shout. He had learned a long time ago that shouting was the tool of men who had run out of other tools. He simply placed the evidence on the table and let it sit there. The money was recovered, as much of it as could be. New arrangements were made, a fund administered by 2 men from the village and 1 from his estate, with accounts rendered annually and independently verified. The channel would be maintained. The flooding would not happen again. Oliver was well enough to travel by the following week. There was no reason to stay. He told his driver Thursday. On Wednesday evening he went to the dispensary. She was in the back room cataloging her father's instruments in the lamp's light. He had learned she did this in the evenings, after the patients were done, not because she had said so, but because he had been paying attention, and this was what you learned when you paid attention. She looked up when he came in. "Oliver is well enough to travel. I know. I saw him this morning. We leave Thursday." "All right." He sat down. He had an offer prepared, 2 days of preparation, the way he prepared everything, knowing the shape of it completely before presenting it. The building, formally deeded to her. Formal recognition through his connections. Not a conventional license, but something that made her practice protected and legitimate and difficult to challenge. A fund for supplies. No conditions attached. He opened his mouth. She said, "What do you want from this?" He closed his mouth. "From what?" he said. "From whatever you're about to offer me. You have the face of someone who has prepared a proposal. I've found that the terms people don't mention are the ones that matter most. So before I hear the offer, what do you want in return?" He looked at her. He had been in negotiations his entire adult life. He had sat across from lawyers and peers and men who made their entire living reading what people wanted and using it against them. No one had ever asked him this. Not before he had said a single thing, as the very first question. "I don't know," he said. It was the truest thing he had said in longer than he could remember. She waited. She was very good at waiting. She let silences be what they were without rushing them toward the next thing. "The offer is," he said, "I deed you this building. I arrange formal recognition. Not a license in the conventional sense, but something that makes your practice legitimate and protected. A fund for ongoing supplies. No conditions attached. I heard you. What do you want from it?" The silence went long enough to become its own answer. "I have been trying to determine that," he said. "I have not arrived at an answer." She looked at him for a long time. "That is the most honest thing you have said to me," she said. "I'm generally honest. You're generally precise. Those are different things. Precision is about packaging. Honesty is about content." He thought about this. He thought she was right. "The offer stands regardless," he said. "Take it or don't. No conditions. I'll think about it." He put on his coat, almost at the door. "Marin," he said. Something changed when he said her name. Not dramatically, just in the quality of the room, the way the quality of a room changes when a key changes in music. "Why do you stay?" he said. "In this village. You have abilities this village can't fully use. You could go somewhere larger. These people cannot afford to lose me," she said. "That's the whole reason. Not even a part of it is wanting to be here." She was quiet for a moment. "A large part of it is wanting to be here," she said. "But that's not the reason. The reason is that they need me. The wanting came later, once I understood what it meant to be somewhere that genuinely needed you. The need came first. The wanting grew from staying for the right reason." He stood at the door. He was 41 years old. He had 4 estates, He had a seat in the House of Lords. He had 30 people in direct employ. He could not find, in any of it, a person who needed him. Not in that way. Not in the way that meant someone would be worse off if he left. He walked back to the inn. He had been 41 years old for nearly 2 months now. He had not found 41 to be materially different from 40, or from 38, or from any of the other years he had passed through and catalogued and left behind. The years had done what years did. They had added to his knowledge and his resources, and the specific hardening of his opinions, and he had managed them without sentiment and moved on. Tonight, standing outside a dispensary in a village he did not like, he had the strange experience of feeling like something had shifted without him deciding to let it shift, as though a decision had been made in the part of him that did not consult the other parts. He did not like this. He liked decisions he had made deliberately, with full information and clear reasoning. He liked to know why he had done a thing before he did it. He liked the examined choice. He had not examined this one. He was not certain it was even a choice. He went back to the inn, because that was where his bed was, and he lay in it and looked at the ceiling for a long time, and the ceiling offered nothing useful, and eventually he stopped looking at it. He did not sleep well. Part 6.5. The night before he left. He woke at 3 in the morning, not from noise, and not from discomfort, from the specific wakefulness of someone whose mind has been working through something in the dark and has arrived somewhere it wants examining. He lay still. The inn was quiet. Through the thin wall he could hear Oliver breathing steadily, the breathing of a man recovering, which was different from the breathing of a week ago, in a way that, now that he noticed the difference, made him aware of how closely he had been listening. He thought about his father. He did not think about his father often. He had spent 30 years arranging his life so that he did not need to. His father had been a large man with large appetites and the particular kind of vanity that belongs to men who have been handsome and have not fully come to terms with the fact that this has stopped being as powerful as it once was. He had run the estates carelessly. He had trusted people he should have examined more carefully. He had borrowed against things he should not have touched. And then, when Aldric was 11 years old, everything that had been borrowed against came due at once, and Aldric had been in a room he should not have been in, behind a door he should not have been behind, and he had heard his father beg. The specific sound of it. The words were ordinary words, ordinary desperate words. The worst part was not the words but the quality of them, the stripped-down quality, the nothing-left quality, the sound of a man who has run out of every move and knows it. Aldric had been 11 years old, and he had understood, standing in the hallway in his socks, that this was the thing he would spend his life preventing. Not the debt specifically, not the shame specifically, but this sound, this condition of having no more alternatives. He had been right to understand it. The understanding had made him what he was. Careful, methodical, controlled. He had not made his father's mistakes. He lay in the dark and considered whether he had made different ones. Marin had told him tonight that the reason she stayed in a small northern village was that the people there could not afford to lose her. She had said it plainly, without performance, the way she said everything, as a fact long since settled, and she had said that the wanting had grown from the reason, not the reverse. The need had come first. The desire to be there had grown out of staying for the right reason. He had built his entire life on wanting first, wanting to be secure, wanting to be the kind of man his father had not been, wanting, in the most private part of himself, to never make that sound, and he had achieved all of those things, all of them, and was lying in a narrow inn bed in a small village and could not name a single person for whom his absence would be a harm. He had dependents. He had people whose livelihoods connected to his decisions, but needed, the way she meant it, he could not find it. He got up. He went to the window. The street was dark. The well, the lane where he had first seen her reading. The dispensary, dark now at 3 in the morning, which would be lit again at 7:15, and which would soon be formally and legally hers. He thought about the deed he was arranging, and what she had asked him about it, and what he had answered. He thought about how long it had been since he had answered a question with "I don't know." He thought he might have been a boy the last time. He went back to bed. He lay in the dark for a while. Then he slept. Part 7. The conversation about power. Thursday morning. The carriages were ready. He went to the dispensary at 8. She had a patient. She looked up when he came in and said 5 minutes, and he sat in the waiting chair. The patient left. The room settled into quiet. The deed is being prepared, he said. You'll have it within the month. The formal recognition will take 3 or 4 months. I'll send word as it progresses. She nodded. Thank you, she said, simply, as information. He was quiet for a moment. I need to ask you something, he said, and I need you to answer the way you answer everything. All right? You have treated my title throughout this week as though it means very little. I want to know whether that is principle, or experience, or something I should understand. She was quiet for a long moment. Experience, she said. Mostly. He waited. I trusted a man with a title once, she said, when I was younger. He was good in many respects. Genuinely good, I think, in the ways that cost him nothing. But when something actually mattered, when it came down to his convenience against my well-being, he chose his convenience, without what I think he would have called a second thought. It wasn't a decision for him, it was just the natural order of things, which I had not fully understood was the order until that moment. She looked at her hands on the table. What I learned, she said, is that some people are inside a certain arrangement of the world, and some aren't, and the people inside it often don't know it, because why would they? I had made the mistake of thinking I was inside it. I was always outside it. He said nothing. That isn't a judgment on you, she said. I don't know you well enough for that. What I know is what you've done here this week, which was more than I expected, which is its own kind of information. You're not angry, she said. No, he said. I am still determining what I am. She looked at him. Power is like height, she said. I don't find height impressive. I find what people do with their height interesting. And what you did with yours this week, the channel, Oliver in the room at 4:30, the child, that was interesting. It was not nothing. He stood. My carriage is waiting. I know. He walked to the door. Aldric, she said. He stopped. The room was very still. Come back if you want to, she said. Not on business. Come back as what you are now, not what you were when your carriage first came down this road. I won't be able to tell the difference from a letter. He stood at the door. Yes, he said. He left. Part 8. The room at home. The house at Cairvast was very large. He had always known this the way you know things that have always been true, not as information, just as the shape of the world. A large house was simply what a house was. He returned on a Friday evening. Staff at the door, dinner arranged, correspondence stacked neatly, everything as he had left it. He sat in his study, bookshelves on 3 sides, his grandfather's desk, the portraits of his family, each face wearing the expression his family had also worn in life, which was not especially warm, but which was consistent. His father, his grandfather, his grandmother, who had made certain adjustments and made peace with them and was not discussing them. He had made decisions in this room that changed the course of things. He had sat in this chair after the difficult periods of his life and found the room steady and sufficient. He sat in it now, and it was the same room it had always been. He was aware, for the first time, of how many things in it were his only because they had always been his. The chair, the desk, the books, half of which he had not opened in a decade, the portraits of people who had built this and left it for him without consulting him on whether he wanted it. He had not earned most of it. He had managed it. He had maintained it. He had worked, genuinely, to run his estates responsibly and his obligations well. But the foundation, the reason it existed, the reason he was the man sitting in the chair, was simply that he had been born into it. He thought about a woman at a work table with a lamp, and her father's instruments, and the complete record of 23 years, of someone else's patience, cataloging it all alone in the evenings. She had earned everything she had. He pulled out paper. He wrote a letter, carefully, the way he wrote everything. The drainage resolution, Oliver's recovery, the child and the fever. He wrote, I find I am unable to stop thinking about the conversation we did not finish. He read it back, put it in the desk drawer, wrote another. I believe the transactional business between us is concluded. I am not certain the other business is. He sent it. Part 9. 11 days. The deed arrived at Marin's dispensary on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the Duke's carriage had rolled out of Thorn's crossing. It was exactly what he had said it would be. The building, formerly hers. The dispensary named as such, with a small legal construction that gave her practice standing it had not previously had. A separate document outlined the recognition process. She read all of it twice. She put it in her father's cabinet, where she kept things she needed to be able to find again. She went to see Patrick Finn's hand, which was healing well. She attended a birth, uncomplicated, 4 hours, mother and child both well. She checked on the woman with the persistent cough. Oliver Marsh wrote from Caervast, asking for the complete account of what she had done during his fever, because he had been delirious for portions of it and wanted the record for his own peace of mind. She wrote back in full detail, without abbreviating the difficult parts, because she thought he was the kind of person who preferred the complete truth to a comfortable version of it. She liked Oliver Marsh. The Duke's letter arrived on day 4. She read it, put it on the work table, went to see a patient, came back, read it again. It told her nothing new. It was a short letter and she had read it correctly the first time. I believe the transactional business between us is concluded. I am not certain the other business is. In the spaces between patients, she turned it over. Not obsessively, thoughtfully, the way you turn over a problem that is interesting rather than urgent. She thought about the man who had sat in her waiting room and apologized for emptying it. She thought about the man who had held a lamp at 4:30 in the morning without offering opinions. She thought about the man who had said yes, just yes, without inflection, without sympathy performance, when she told him about the trust she had misplaced, in the tone of a person receiving information and not arguing with it. She thought about what she knew of men with power, which was not nothing, which had been learned at some cost, and what she knew of this particular man, which was more than she usually knew of anyone in 2 weeks, and which did not match what she expected. She thought about the difference between caution and its close relative, which was the decision never to let anything be uncertain again, which looked like safety from the outside, which felt, from the inside, like something that kept getting smaller. The deed arrived, thank you. It means more than I expect you know, which is itself a kind of comment. Oliver's letter also arrived. I sent him the complete account, including the parts he didn't ask for, because I think he is the kind of person who would rather have the truth than a comfortable version of it. The conversation we didn't finish, I know which one you mean. I have been thinking about it. I believe the reason we didn't finish it is that it requires you to be here. A letter is too small for it. Come back if you want to. Come back as what you are now, not what you were when your carriage first came down this road. I won't be able to tell the difference from a letter. She folded it, sealed it, sent it. Then she went to see the woman with the persistent cough and spent 2 hours on her, and walked home in the late afternoon light with the particular quality of someone who has said the true thing and put it somewhere it cannot be taken back from. She walked home past the well, past the lane, past the place where Patrick Finn's house stood with its lamp lit in the window. Patrick's hand was healed. Nora, the blacksmith's daughter, was herself. Oliver Marsh was writing letters from Caervast and eating properly and would probably outlive all of them. The dispensary would be formally hers within the month. That meant something she was still locating the edges of. Not security exactly, because she had always felt the practice was hers even without the paper. Something more like legibility, like finally being visible to the systems that had always been able to see around her. She thought about what it had taken. Not just the deed, the whole of it. A man arriving in a carriage, a man sitting on a patient bench, a man asking what he wanted when he didn't know, a man on a floor at 4:30 in the morning holding a lamp, because that was what was needed. She had been careful for a long time. She had been right to be careful. She was still careful. But careful and closed were different things, and she had been thinking about that difference for 11 days now, and she had arrived at a letter. The letter was sent. She went home. Part 10. The Traveling Coat. He received the letter on a Thursday morning at his desk at Caervast. He was standing when he read it. He had recognized the handwriting when he picked it up. which was information he could not entirely explain, since he had only seen it once, on a patient file on her work table, and he opened it before he sat down and was still standing when he finished. He read it again. Come back as what you are now, not what you were when your carriage first came down this road. I won't be able to tell the difference from a letter. He sat down. He had a full day. Estate business that had been accumulating since his return. A meeting with his solicitor. Correspondence requiring answers. Oliver, recovered and working with the determined energy of someone making up for time lost. He sat at his desk. He thought about a woman who hadn't moved when his carriage came because she was reading and hadn't noticed. He thought about a woman who had said there is no figure with the tone of someone reporting weather. He thought about what it felt like to hold a lamp steady at 4:30 in the morning over someone else's work, being neither the most important person in the room nor trying to be. He thought about what she had said, come back as what you are now. He was not entirely certain what he was now. He knew something had shifted. Not dramatically, not with the noise of a man having a revelation. In the quiet way that walls develop cracks. You don't hear it. You find it later. You press on it and discover it gives. He thought about 41 years of accumulated power and arriving at a study window, unable to name a person who needed him. He called his valet. Prepare for travel, he said. 2 days. His valet did not ask where. He had worked for Aldric for 6 years and had developed excellent instincts about which questions were welcome and which were not. He began to pack. Aldric worked through the morning. He resolved what could be resolved that day and delegated what could be delegated to others he trusted. He left his secretary the most complete set of instructions he had ever written, organized, specific, covering everything that would need handling in the next 2 weeks. Then he stood at the study window and looked at the gray gardens for a while. He was a man who needed to know what a decision was before he made it. This had been the operating principle of his life since he was 11 years old, standing in a hallway in his socks. Examine everything, know everything, then decide. He did not know, exactly, what he was doing. He knew he was going back to Thorn's crossing. He knew that the woman waiting at the other end of that journey was the only person in his adult life who had refused his money, looked at him directly, told him true things about herself, and expected him to handle them, and asked him once, just once, without repeating it, what he wanted, and had accepted "I don't know" as a real answer rather than an evasion. He did not know what came after arriving. He had never arrived at a next thing without already knowing what it was. He found that this was not exactly frightening, something adjacent to frightening, the same general territory, different country, something with the weight of importance without the sick quality of dread, something that felt, cautiously, in the tentative way of a man who is not accustomed to feeling anything tentatively, like the right direction. He found his traveling coat. What happened when he arrived is not recorded here. Some things belong entirely to the people they happen to, and recording them would be a kind of intrusion this story does not wish to make. What is recorded? The dispensary in Thorn's Crossing operated under formal recognition for 30 more years. Oliver Marsh served as steward at Cairvast for another 11, and in his retirement wrote a short memoir that mentioned, briefly and with evident warmth, a physician in the northern counties who had saved his life without making a production of it. The drainage channel was maintained without incident. The village did not flood again. The fund was administered honestly, accounts rendered every year, the records clean. The county administration, for its part, never formally licensed her, but it also never, after the Duke of Cairvast's intervention, attempted to close her down. This was, she later said to no one in particular, more or less the same thing. Nora, the blacksmith's daughter, grew up. She became, in time, a person who was sick once as a child and then was not, which is the most ordinary thing in the world, and also, to the right people, the most significant. The book Marin had been reading in the road on the day the Duke's carriage arrived was a text on fever medicine. She had taken it outside because the light was better there. She finished it that same evening, when the village was quiet and the lamp was lit, and the dispensary was exactly what it had always been. She had noticed the carriage. She had simply decided not to move. Some stories end before the ending. This is one of them. What remains is this: the road into Thorn's Crossing, the well, the lane, and somewhere in the middle of the morning, a woman who could have moved and chose not to, reading a page she had already read twice, because the idea in it needed more time than one reading could give it.